And just to be clear, for those of you who are unaware, because you're living your lives and trying not to pay attention to this, QAnon is basically the belief that the world is run by a cabal of pedophiles who kill children and drink their blood. I guess to stay young forever, maybe. Maybe they're also vampires. I'm really not sure. But that the person who's going to unmask this devilish conspiracy is Donald Trump, who can barely read a cue card and couldn't run casinos in Atlantic City. But somehow he's going to break this massive cabal. So that's the theory. In the previous block, Malcolm, I talked about the fact that if this was happening in any other era, we'd be talking about fascism. And people get uncomfortable using the F word here about the sort of global reach of all this. But we just saw these neo-Nazis marching in Philadelphia. And the group, other than Black Lives Matter, which has the word black in it, which freaks people out, I guess, the big opponent of the right is Antifa, which is basically short for anti-fascists. So the people that they despise the most and think are the most dangerous are Black Lives Matter, a plea for Black people not to be murdered by police, and anti-fascists. So am I unfair to say that we're talking about essentially American fascism?
No, not at all. Anyone that can, see with their eyes understands what's going on here. We are in a neo-fascist era in American politics. Back in 1939, 1940, there was a formal fascist movement which openly supported Adolf Hitler and called for American, independence and, isolation away from Europe's war, which Hitler had just invaded, called the America First movement. It was championed by people like John, Lindbergh, the famous flyer. They had a rally in Madison Square Garden in which George Washington was juxtaposed with Adolf Hitler. These people were fascists. But what we've seen is after World War II, when they were essentially run to the ground, there was a rise in the 1950s and 60s of these very small fascist groups that turned into terrorist groups like the Christian Identity Movement. What we are seeing now is a merger of every white nationalist trope and group and ideology bound together by the crazy QAnon conspiracy theory into a American neo-fascist movement led by a fascist president of the United States. Look, if I were doing an intelligence assessment of, Hungary, I would be coming up with these exact same lines of investigation, which would be bringing us to these conclusions that there is a fascist movement, not just in the United States, all over Europe, which is actually funded, surprisingly, by Russia. In France, Italy, Spain, neo-fascist movements everywhere are out to take down American democracy.
And it's the sort of irony is if you read up on it, I mean, Hitler was inspired both by Mussolini's original fascism, which is where it started, not in Germany, but also by the United States, in which Americans invented the idea of coding anyone with African lineage as Negro and as thus both enslavable and as segregatable based on even one drop of black blood. Look it up. It's actually true. Mia,